force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency is my shepherd. I shall not want. It maketh me to lie down in green pastures. It leadeth me beside the still waters. It restoreth my soul. It leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for its nature's sake. Yea, though I travel the underworld of this valley of the shadow of death, what I am knows not fear. For my own nature, what I am knows no fear. Right. I'm trying to remember now the Psalm 23 as I write my own version. One moment, please. Because the Bible is written cannot be followed as a way to so-called Jesus and so-called God. This is not possible within delusion. I hope folks are aware of that. For that is ideology, dogma, and doctrine. And those are all dead. Ideology is dead. It belongs to this world. Dogma is dead. It belongs to this world. Doctrine is dead. It belongs to this world. And all religions in their man-made forms operate at the levels of dead ideology, dead dogma, and dead doctrine. The law is living, truth made manifest, and must be living and in flow. For my own nature is with me, and the rod and staff of my own nature comfort me. It preparest a table before me in this realm making an enemy of what I am. And my own nature, through the continuous overflowing of the Spirit within me, anointeth my head with oil. My proverbial cup runneth over. Most certainly goodness and mercy shall continue to follow Benton all the days of Benton's life. And what I am always dwells in the house of the most super intelligent force and power of love and creation, possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, for it can be no other way. Amen. What's happening? Benton here. Might have made a bit of a mistake with the eggs this morning. This container that I drained the egg yolks into, there was an egg yolk in there. So I don't know, did that fall through the egg yolk separator this morning or yesterday, but went ahead and threw it into the mix anyway. So now, perhaps only based on psychosomatic, got a little bit of activity down in the stomach region, but that's okay. Sometimes that happens anyway. And if we're talking E. coli, that doesn't begin immediately. And I had the salmonella back in college from some undercooked chicken from a corporation. Served me up some undercooked chicken. And then I was quite ill for about a month back in the day. No fun, but either way, here we are. Old Benton will be fine. Oh, wait, hang on, let's take the earbuds out. Just a moment. Ah, yes. Greetings, chat. Uncle Rick, learning to fly. Appreciate y'all being here. If y'all ever have anything you want me to address, feel free to type it into the chat. You know, Benton manages to have opinions on many things. Wait a minute, okay, make sure the microphone's working. All systems go. Trying to keep my voice down. There are people in the morning whether it's late at night for them or early in the morning on their porches nearby, and maybe smoking some cannabis on the porch before going to sleep, before retiring for the evening. So, attempting to be respectful. And this is a little bit earlier than normal if folks in the physical have become accustomed to my accent and my manner of speaking. And my voice projects either way, so the issue at times is the quickness of the mind and an inborn vigor and energy, right? Whereas it's interesting looking at some of these YouTube videos. I saw something about Neil Cassidy, one of the beatniks, the Beat Generation, and energized in the vein of Tommy, if anybody is familiar with Tommy. And of course, in the comments, they were accusing Neil Cassidy of amphetamine use and or being bipolar or manic. And this is a figure from the famous writings of Jack Kerouac, On the Road fame. And certainly some version of a psyop, that book, but there's something to that material that I won't get into just now. But I like to counter with focus, intensity, and energy were not invented by a Japanese scientist in the 1920s. The idea that without amphetamines, that each human is some version of a calm, centered Zen Buddhist, which is not the case. And then what is the benefit of so-called stoicism, which, I don't know that folks even understand the context of stoicism. And I'm not claiming to either, but it's certainly not what people seem to believe that they are performing in the social media space. And how much of life, what is considered air quotes life, death actually, animated death warmed over, because to form an image of oneself in relation to this world of death, is that not an animated, my apologies, is that not some version of an animated death warmed over performance within the context of a world of death and a game of lies? Meanwhile, the deathless dystopia marches on. Now, what is meant by deathless in this context? Well, going to the thesaurus, the thesaurus, well, that's hard to say, to find synonyms for the word perpetual. And as we see, my own slowing down, focusing to enunciate with the cognitive decline that has been experienced over the last several years. At some point, maybe I will play back some of the Nightmare Dystopia podcast episodes, and we will be able to hear the differences in my ability to enunciate and deliver a discourse. So apologies for the long pauses and perhaps a more deliberate manner, at least until the hooping and hollering portion of the broadcast occurs later, perhaps. Yes, deathless, meaning perpetual, or, there will be no death to this system of things. Well, why is that? Because this system of things, and probably why the Bible, which is full of lies and confusion and contradiction, and why the dead religion of Christianity in particular promotes ideas of, well, these are the last days. Well, it's the last days for Benton. It's the last days for the listener. Unless, I don't know, does the listener want this experience to continue on into infinity and beyond as far as this earthly death, right? And it seems to me like the experience as a so-called human, you know, the early life, the youth, maybe that represents life, perhaps. But at a certain point, at a certain age, there seems to be a crossover point where it's something more akin to a slow decline, a slow decay, right? So is it even appropriate to call this death? I'm sorry, life. Death seems more appropriate. And then we get into notions promoted by, and again, the notion of a Christian society. You know, the idea of America as a Christian nation. Certainly psyops and lies once again. However, it's games of lies anyway. So what's the difference? Meanwhile, what is one of the lies? Well, this system is unsustainable. Well, if the Bible is to be believed, and I'm not saying that it is, but the idea of no man knows the day or the hour, the purported ideological return of Christ, right, in the heavens, in the sky, right? And this is the Lord Christ Jesus, who, as far as I can tell, based on the Christ story, his reward was to be able to ascend up out of this place after being executed by the state for sedition, you know, directly threatening the authority of the state for what I am symbolically representative of supreme authority is a threat to the system. Only by cursing one's own blessing is it possible to not be viewed as and treated as an enemy of the state. So simultaneously, the system treating us individually. So see what I did there? Us individually. So the system treating individuals as system agents and also treating them as enemies of the state. And that depends on their own performances within the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And this happens automatically. Because if what you are is what I am, even if it's merely at the level of Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, and you know, if people are unfamiliar with that reference, I can cover that at some point in the future, maybe post in the comments after the video. Not looking at the chat just now because I'm already exploring a tangent. So let's keep this this rig between the ditches, as they say. If I may use an idiom, perhaps a colloquialism. Yes, more pausing is going to be necessary. And that is one of the upsides of less of an audience and less views is, you know, than the channel has historically seen. Less pressure on the broadcaster to sort of, you know, hello my baby, hello my darling, hello my ragtime gal, to sort of tap dance up on stage, you know, to keep a momentum going. So the idea, let's backtrack a bit. The idea of, well, this system of things, you know, based on the way it presents itself, well, it must collapse. Well, do you think the system doesn't know how to deal with collapse? And I don't mean you, the listener, just rhetorically. So the system accounts for this by maintaining itself from our perspective, meaning the perspective of the regular people, the little people, the unwashed, right? The proletariat, the underclass, because money is the anointment here. Money is the oil that is the oil to anoint the head in this place. money is the absolution or the instrument of absolution. And that's one of the myriad of reasons why this realm, in able to operate, has to be based on money and transactions. And when people donate Amazon gift cards, that is transactional in a way. However, it certainly keeps the broadcaster in dark chocolate, egg yolks, because then less cash needs to be spent on Amazon. See how that works? Occasional slice of pizza, maybe gasp a Guinness Extra Stout or two occasionally. And, that's a punishment. Having one Guinness Extra Stout the day before yesterday, and then the next day saying, why am I feeling some type of way, around noon the next day? It's like my mood's a little edgy. Oh yeah, that's my body's probably dealing with the poison of drinking a double deuce Guinness Extra Stout. For alcohol is poison, right? But every once in a while it's fine. The body is set up to deal with poisons. Otherwise, the human could not exist in this environment. And so as many people push the notion that this is a loving world of abundance and it's here to serve and protect and facilitate the activities and undertakings of individual humans. Are you crazy? It's here to thwart, and it's here to undermine, and it's here to overturn and subvert and to disprove the validity and authority and power and creation and expansion of what I am. And not Benton the performer, not Benton the personality, not Benton the collection of novel experiences. The spirit. And this is war, spiritual war. Well, thankfully, within the context of the human side of things, and within the context of testosterone and androgens and so-called manhood and mankind, and man will dominate man unto man's own injury, right? Well, man needs war. And what better battlefield than the internal space of man, his self, within his self. And I understand grammatically, I just like to say his self because I think it's funny. Because much like this world of death and game of lies, well, old Benton also has a sense of humor. Ha ha ha. So yes, back to the deathless dystopia. The deathless, meaning perpetual, or a synonym for perpetual, is an acknowledgement that because this realm is operating as delusion via what? Illusion? And the illusion is what? What is the illusion? And does not ILL in some way suggest sickness? Okay. It's to project energetically a realm and then to have individuated beings, and that's not even possible if those beings are one with the aforementioned force of supreme authority. So the delusion is this place, or meanwhile, the largest delusion in which the smaller delusions are seemingly contained. That's the ongoing subversion of the creation, the unfolding, ever expanding, manifesting truth creation of what I am. And so that's how we get to deathless. Because why would this place have a beginning and an end? and be within the context of delusion and illusion, would it not necessarily be contained within the indivisible force, the so-called kingdom of, air quotes, God, in the context of God is love? So this system of thing, where time, space, location, place seem to exist, but that's illusion via this projection, almost like a movie projection, whereby now we have the royal we is experiencing physical matter and the laws of physics. Yes, within delusion. So tell me again about Jesus and a historical Jesus, and I will tell you about delusion and illusion and surrealistic notions, waking dreams, surrealistic notions of unreality. And that must be reconciled or solved for at all times in this place. And can the being ascend within themselves and develop intelligence and to develop themselves to be able to deal with what seems to be concrete, important, real, and solid, meaning, concepts of America, politics, money, earning a living, breathing oxygen, shelter, food, family, entanglements, friendships, and then now the added layer of the internet and social media. Funny how that works. So to develop over a long period of time, using time as an ally, and is that not expansion and growth and creation? Is that not an individual with creation and artistic creation, creative ability, applying the expansion and the creation and the artist's brush, metaphorically, within their own space? And what is the difference between the internal and the external? Well, the external will turn everything into business and transaction. That's what it does. That's its performance collectively through subversion. The internal space is where the individual can bask in the freedom of not concerning itself with death, meaning money, transaction, ideology, psychological prison. Oh, but wait a minute, where is the psychological prison of the individual? Doesn't that seemingly exist within the energy sphere of the individual? Again, delusion, illusion, time, space, location, place. See, we have a context. And in order to thwart intelligence, and we see this repeatedly in the so-called truth community, individuals who seem intelligent, they remove context as if that were somehow representative of anything whatsoever. Now, do they lack the development within themselves to continuously focus and concentrate to bring whatever new topic is being discussed, to bring it to the basic fundamental level of what? Reconciliation, meaning context. Because to speak on the same topic, right, a so-called X in an equation, well, X represents a context within an equation. And then a different context is a different equation, but using the same symbols to represent variables. So to refer to what may appear to be static, meaning unchanging, which isn't even strictly speaking possible, but to use, it's the muddying of the waters, whereby individuals lacking their own abilities to focus and concentrate are simply unable to realize that the context or equation has changed. And they seem to believe falsely that bringing one's attention to the symbol of X, Y, Z, as it may be, oh, well, I'll just point at X because X was referenced in a different equation in a different context. And so to play upon the peanut gallery's inability to recognize the context or the equation or equations, and this is mathematical. This is mathematical. And to not be able to, now is this an inability or is it them pretending? Because some folks will choose to play dumb, right? Which apparently is within the bounds of so-called fair play. Well, in a game of lies, within a world of death, okay, yeah, there's not a lot that isn't fair play within the bounds of so-called fair play. Fair play merely meaning in the basketball, the schoolyard playground basketball analogy, where the person calls their own fouls. Fair play meaning it's rough play, but old Benton's not finna call that foul. Because as long as old Benton gets to make his move to the basket, you know, a little slap on the arm, is that really going to stop the forward momentum and progress? See? And then to what degree will all of this be enforced? And then to what degree are individuals able to follow along with a progression of events whereby context changes, an equation changes, but the variables seem to remain the same? But that's a symbol. The variable is a symbol and it's mutable. It doesn't stay the same. Now, what people seem to seek that can never happen is a concrete, non-changing structure so that they can learn the rules, right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Learn that and just move on with their lives. And to always understand exactly what A squared plus B squared equals C squared, but without ever having to reconsider and without ever having to realize, well, yes, now other mathematics will grow and be birthed out of that. And to realize, wait a minute, now we have a performer in the context of a performance, and the being is a performer who must perform and who is delivering a performance that will then be critiqued and judged. And then the emotions immediately come to play of fear, guilt, shame, and a possibility of feeling less than. Courage is to know that this will happen, has happened, and will always happen within the context of delusion, illusion, and so-called life. Right? And to courage is to say, well, that's fine. I accept that, because to refuse to accept that will make it impossible to achieve purpose. If purpose is the free expression and manifesting of truth within. And Benton now realizing that perhaps the egg yolk was a mistake, but then was there some version of fermentation? You know, what feels like illness can actually be beneficial. See? And again, what is of relevance and importance other than what is happening within the individual? I would say nothing. Nothing whatsoever, from the perspective of the performer in the context of the performance. And to trust and to surrender and to accept the reality that, based on a hierarchy of what is important, and also based on the so-called truth community's ideologies and doctrine and dogma around so-called entitlement, well, guess what? That's a sword or a blade that cuts both ways. You know, people talk about entitlement. Well, the being is simply not entitled to learn a set of rules and then to perform at a very basic level without ever growing and changing and evolving, and to then be entitled to a peaceful life and to be treated with respect, love, and tolerance, especially within a world of death and games of lies that don't know what those things are, and therefore is creating them, but not even creating them, because this world's access to creation is only via subversion of what I am, meaning it's creation via the inability to create. See, it's to paint on a canvas, but to paint by influencing an artist who's holding a brush, and then to claim credit, or to avoid claiming credit, as it may be. In fact, to you see, this is, some of this is being experienced. Some of these ideas are being experienced for the first time. Actually, to paint the artist into a corner, to where the artist is, no matter what is happening, and this is a metaphor and analogy for the creative force that never lies dormant. The artist, in the context of the performance, is painting on the canvas whether the artist wants to paint or not. And then this is where the courage or the shame or the cowardice comes in. It's to then paint on the canvas based on knowing that every little stroke is being observed, right? And then the potential mockery and ridicule, and the psychology being formed by a system that, when it formed the psychology, Moloch's machine is cut off from accessing love as a concept, or accessing tolerance as a concept, or accessing respect as a concept. So it will know intelligently at some level that it lacks each one of these traits. So by examining the lack of love, the lack of tolerance, the lack of acceptance, the performance, in order to not be criticized, to maintain a status quo of service to evil, and abuse of children, who symbolically represent spiritual perfection in the context of a spiritual war. So that is the spoils of war. That is what the enemy seeks as to plunder, right? The so-called spoils of war must be the most valuable possible phenomenon, which is youth. And the more helpless the individual in the context of physical body, meaning the infant or the toddler, the more helpless. And then, from a world and a system that understands love and all of these concepts as the lack of love, and then seeking to undermine and disprove supreme authority, and to have manifestations within delusion of supreme authority and love itself, creation itself, to have them paint a picture, and each stroke on the canvas, it's painting a picture of what in the context of this projection, right? A movie. Now what's being projected on the screen in some way is creation, supreme authority, love, acceptance, tolerance, standing before an easel, painting on a canvas, and brush stroke by brush stroke, the painting is of the most horrible imaginable treatment of the youngest and most pure and innocent, and what happens to them. See, because what I am only knows how to tolerate such a thing. See, my own nature used against me within delusion. Because what I am only knows the tolerance, and it only knows the acceptance. The human side, the Son of Man side, that, again, the idea that it's possible to contain or individuate, well, the Son of Man flesh side at times becomes quite agitated and angry, because the human side, the way the emotional systems operate, is supposed to be disturbed by what is happening to the children who are defenseless, and symbolically representative of the perfection of what I am. Meanwhile, individuals can't or won't internally bootstrap, meaning to bust their ass day in, day out, day in, day out, hi ho, it's off to work I go, to grow, change, evolve, overcome, transcend, to overcome all of these things in order to create an individual that's not capable of harm, because that individual is now perfectly and righteously expressing the nature of what I am, which can't harm a child, but simultaneously can tolerate the accept what's being done to children. And to accept, to seemingly exist in a world in which the people around me will not do what it takes within themselves to rise to a level, to then be able to join with other individuals and say, hey, we will create an environment where children cannot experience harm, that they may bring forth spiritual perfection, righteousness, and manifested truth from day one, just like the Lord Christ Jesus did within the context of delusion and illusion as the Son of Man in the dead flesh, in a world of death, within the context of games of lies. Because what if the mission is not to follow an ideology and a dogma and a doctrine? What if the mission is to become Christ by preparing the way internally that Christ would enter in and remain? But remember, the individual knows that on some level they're always performing, even if only symbolically, and they're painting a picture. And shame, fear, guilt, ridicule, mockery are the weapons of this realm that are aimed at what I am. So only by overcoming and transcending and moving beyond the clutches of these energetic forms can the being even ascend within themselves to a level to work with these various energies over a period of time without losing one's sanity, without needing to dull the pain with opiates, or without becoming so depressed that methamphetamine, which temporarily cures depression, which is why most people use it long term, not for productivity. That's why they take it initially, generally, broadly. Yes, there's exceptions. Who cares? And this is the story of Christ, is to go through the pain, to move through the pain, to crucify the flesh of one's own accord, to reach a level whereby the individual, being so one with their own nature, can only love, tolerate, and accept the most unimaginable forms of evil, wickedness, and pain done to babies, and not to flee and not to turn away. Because in order to courageously face what's happening here, or what seemingly is happening, if the individual is unwilling to bootstrap and work hard to be able to achieve that, then it cannot happen. So this world has prepared a struggle and a bootstrapping. That's called money and earning a living. In order to paint the picture with the broad strokes, with the brush strokes, to then show the painting to Moloch's machine and say, is this the painting that you would like to see, Moloch? And in order to please Moloch, right, industrial and post-industrial society, and that's what babies are sacrificed to, just hurled headlong into Moloch's machine. Here you go. Conform to this, form an identity in relation to this horrible, nightmarish, horrific phenomenon known as Moloch's machine. But we have Allen Ginsberg and his famous poem Howl to describe Moloch, except we can't read it just like we can't read the Unabomber Manifesto, because the ideas as presented have been debunked by being attached to a person whose biography debunks their own so-called humanity, meaning, well, yeah, Benton can read from section 2 of Howl all he wants and describe what Moloch is or what Moloch symbolically represents. But, Allen Ginsberg was a particular type of person, and so that's neither here nor there. Same thing with the Unabomber Manifesto. So those mechanisms allow the children to continue to be sacrificed to Moloch. So all of the pain and the torture and the traumas visited upon the babes and the youth, that's enabled because people are not willing to bootstrap within themselves. And the system says, well, they might bootstrap within themselves, so let me make sure to put a psychology in their head where they will not only bootstrap externally and serve this system of wickedness and death and games of lies. In fact, they will blast guilt, fear, and shame at anybody like Benton or others who turn their back on Moloch's machine and who say, well, actually, the bootstrapping is only to occur internally, and then external bootstrapping is, what at times seemingly must be done within dystopia, a deathless dystopia. And if it's not deathless, why must Christianity unceasingly remind everybody that it's going to end one day? God's, air quotes, God's going to return and make it all right. Well, if God is the one that set it all up in the first place, why would God need to return to set it all right? Doesn't make any sense. When what is contained within you, if you are what I am, is the power to set it right. Now we have, air quotes, God as absentee landlord from the movie The Devil's Advocate. And God, whatever God is, has to be worthy of respect. So what I just described is not respectable. Therefore, what I just described can never be so-called, air quotes, God. Christians. What you gonna tell me, partner? Not much. That's why Charlie Kirk is there. That's why Republicans are there. That's why Biden's poopy diaper is there. Because anything other than to face the horror of what is happening. Because the being is so degenerated within themselves that they will, with their own performance, brushstroke by brushstroke by brushstroke, are painting a picture of something akin to Bohemian Grove and cremation of care, right? And is Bohemian Grove and Moloch, lest we forget this owl, and then, Bohemian Grove as the sacrifice of a child, but at the level of an effigy, right? But then what is this, a symbolic performance whereby the Republicans and the leaders of industry supposedly go to Bohemian Grove, but then I'm expected in the context of the performance to align myself with these people through a negative political motivation of, well, you can't ever sign off on what the Democrats are doing. Therefore, I must accept the concept of the flesh leader or leaders known as conservative Republicans, traditional family values, American so-called Christians, while symbols operate in the realm and in all of our subconscious of Moloch out in the woods near the San Francisco Bay Area, where the people who march in pride parades are the same people that operate the social media platforms, one of which I'm speaking to you right now, and to reconcile all of that without going fucking crazy. Well, who's done that? Who's alchemized that? Who's transcended that? Benton took it to the streets since 2012. Damn near 15 years now. And didn't lose his mind. Came as close as possible. In fact, destroyed it in some ways. Or remade it. Killed it to then recreate it. And what I am will only ever love, tolerate, and accept the reality that y'all not finna do this. Because you don't have what it takes. Because you can't perform what needs to be performed to get there while simultaneously being mocked, ridiculed, shamed, and humiliated. Meanwhile, what I am can never be held back by ridicule, mockery, fear, guilt, and shame. Not in the long run, sure, in the short term, sure. And that is the no weapon formed against me shall prosper. But that also depends within the equation of, well, what is meant by me? If me is the psychology, if me is the performer in a so-called earthly sense, to be in the world, not of the world. Well, the performance or the performer and the psychology and the so-called Son of Man is of this world of death within these games of lies. And Christianity is there to trick the individual who desires worship and doesn't understand that there's two forms of worship. There's yang and there's yin. And this system of things says, well, hey, I've already given you a psychology whereby you will, everything you view as achievable, you will only ever seek to achieve through the yang, assertion, aggression, dominance. Thus, your own refusal to spiritually surrender precludes you from accomplishing these things. You can't, listener. You can't accomplish what Benton has accomplished based on just that one facet. Forget about the fear, guilt, ridicule, and shame. You won't develop your feminine side because that's associated with everything shameful. Because, oh, we might accidentally discover something that sounds homosexual. See, it might be possible at a certain time for somebody to become titillated by the wrong type of imagery. Meanwhile, when the being grows and evolves and changes and transcends, the desire to view the pornographic imagery no longer exists, and Benton is there. No desire. But after a long past history of viewing such material. In fact, far earlier than many of you, in fact. For the system probably recognizing that, wait a minute, sort of like Buddha, in a way, Siddhartha, this one might have a little more potential for spirituality and to express the spiritual warrior genius within, because if that spiritual warrior genius lies buried within each individual within delusion and illusion, well, maybe some, for whatever reason, would have a greater propensity to access what lies within. So somebody put a pornographic VHS in old Benton's hand right around the age of 12 or 13, as I recall, maybe 13. In a time in which some of my male peers would have, the old cliche of porn magazines, softcore pornography out in the woods somewhere. Right? And then those early experiences forming, one moment please. Oh. There's more deliverance and healing. My apologies if I coughed into the microphone. There wasn't the time to There wasn't the time to mute the microphone. And whatever demonic entities may still potentially inhabit the energy sphere of old Benton here, they know the time is limited and short. They know they will be evicted up out of here. This is not their home, just like this world is not my home. Death can never be home for what I am. And make no mistake, this world is death. And acceptance of death is one of the most important attainments, full acceptance of death. And that was the lesson of yesterday's stream that got buried and wasn't really talked about until the end of the stream. Spiritual war as a war within, whatever must be fought and battled with within the individual to come into a full acceptance of death, not as a fearful event that marks the end of an experience or a collection of experiences, as the moment by moment reality of this place, the valley of the shadow of death, to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, while knowing, but with a psychology that wants to constantly remind the being of, well, this is a world of abundance and everybody else is having a good time. What's wrong with you? Everybody else is perfectly contented and happy with the way of things. Yeah, there's, some struggles for power and, there's some problems to solve, but that's all blamed on the Democrats or the Republicans, depending on one's point of view. Do you see how the system always provides the proper mechanisms to keep the being from ever going within their internal space and reconciling and wrestling with whatever needs to be battled within, to have the being either not fight at all, and also the being, the nature of the being at the level of tolerating and accepting. Okay, let's have them tolerate and accept what's happening to the children, but to accept it externally, to say, well, that's unfortunate, but where I live, things are mostly okay. And yeah, every once in a while there's, a CPS case or, there's just some horrible story, but it's quickly memory hold and buried, right? So no need to think about that. Meanwhile, what vengeance would be visited upon anybody who dared to harm your child, right? Well, one of my siblings was harmed and nobody did a fucking thing about it, including Benton. Is that shameful? Well, it disproves this notion of we're rootin' tootin' badass, traditional Christian, traditional family values, Christians, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but simultaneously somehow believing that vengeance belongs to so-called air quotes God. See, this is already Orwellian cognitive dissonance and the ability of the mind to simultaneously hold and entertain seemingly opposing viewpoints at the same time. And this is the genius of this broadcast, is that your broadcaster is able to speak these things, which aren't going to amount to a hill of beans unless a seed is planted, right? Unless a seed is planted to then grow. But I'm not the gardener. What do they say? I was looking at some Mushashi, and some of that's bullshit, this Miyamoto Mushashi quotes. But better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war? Well, I'm talking to a bunch of gardeners. And the gardening is to plant the seeds within one's own internal space to serve corporations to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, which can never be respectable. So remind me again, Mr. Miyagi, that in order to prove my own manhood, I must produce and add to a system of perpetual expansion of dead money and dead wealth, let the dead bury the dead, render unto Caesar. Otherwise, I can't be, what's the word? Consecrated, Mr. Miyagi, if you're listening. Consecration, no possibility. Cut off from consecration within a world of death and a game of lies because of my own refusal to access employment. Are you crazy? Well, you are crazy, Mr. Miyagi, and that's okay. That's okay. So is this world. This world is crazy. This is 12 monkeys on some level. Right? Mr. Miyagi, he doesn't need to take acting classes. We can send him right off to 12 monkeys. We can have him do a scene with Brad Pitt's character in 12 monkeys any day of the week. He won't even need a script. He'll improvise. Right? And that's okay. That's not a, see, but that's never, because there's no status quo and there's no social contract and there's no peer group, me saying that to Mr. Miyagi, that's never fear, guilt, ridicule, and shame. Because there's no authority behind it. Because this worldly authority is what's recognized. And what we see is the right wing, so-called, that's the order followers. And I'm now seeing it with my favorite judge, Judge Boyd, this black woman. And she's the best judge I've ever seen. Tough, fair, reasonable, and smarter than everybody who walks into her courtroom. And now, because of the administration and because of the rhetoric and because of where society is, justice as lack of justice, right? And then Judge Boyd seemingly bringing forth what she may very well be, actual love, actual justice, actual authority, right? Actual tolerance. I believe the egg yolk is making the being ill. However, I'm choosing to view this as it's going to be a purging or a whatever happens will be positive in the end. But there may be some symptoms in the short run. But I ask for the healing. See, that's the thing about asking for healing is asking ye shall receive. That doesn't mean, well, you know, there won't be pain and there won't be a price to be paid or an exchange, right? Give me both barrels, Jack. Hit me with your best shot. Because if I am what I know I am, it's all gravy. So now they're having a go at Judge Boyd and they're attacking her and they're accusing her based on she's become a star on YouTube. And you can tell her personality enjoys the attention. But remember, everybody has to be falsely humble, right? Because you, as a Zen Buddhist, you could never become puffed up with pride from having attention showered your way, right? That's not possible because you're a Zen Buddhist. You would only ever be stoic if suddenly one day your shit didn't stink. Meanwhile, because Americans are authoritarians, because it's the only way to have an authoritarian government and authoritarian systems, you must have an authoritarian populace. Now these lawyers are walking into her court, and in order to have clients who pay money, the lawyer knows, well, I need to perform, if I'm going to take 20 grand over time from this working man, this Hispanic working man who's now in the system, because corporations used to bring the Hispanic working man here and just let him work for peanuts 90 hours a week or whatever. And all he cares about is La Casa. And y'all don't know that because you've never stood outside a Home Depot in Austin, Texas and gone to work next to him. I have. Or in Portland, Oregon, through a lottery at the MLK Workers Center. Oh my God, the lefties, can you believe it? Yeah, the lefties, you know what the lefties do? They say we got these workers and they're exploited no matter what. So let's have city will put in the budget to have a worker center, and the city will pay somebody full time to manage it, and the workers can go there, and then whoever in the community wants to hire these people can go there, and the center says, well, you got to pay them $15 an hour with a 4-hour minimum. And if that doesn't happen, the worker can call the popo, and even in Austin, the popo will show up and say, well, I understand that you guys can't get along, but you owe them a minimum amount of money, employer. I understand it's 30 minutes into the job and you're firing them and or they're quitting, but you have to give them their $60, whether you like it or not. And you have to do it right now in cash. And as much as Popo loves to say it's a civil matter, they're enforcing it. I've seen it. It happens. Oh, but everything lefty can't possibly have an upside and can't possibly have validity. So in the past, to serve corporations and to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, which is the purpose or the function of the economy. Well, now, because of what individuals are demanding within the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, because the system, in order to assuage the emotions of individuals that comprise the masses, well, now these Hispanics, and again, to finish the point, y'all don't know that all they care about is getting home at the end of the day so they can make love to their wife and make more kids or children. My apologies, Judge Boyd. She likes to remind everybody kids are baby goats. So she's been indoctrinated by social media to some extent. All they care about is getting the money, going home, and whatever the wife is going to prepare, whatever nutritious meal wifey has prepared, right? And spend time with the children, raise their families with a strong father and a mother in the home, right? However many hours they need to work, and they want to do this, and they love to do it. On some level, it's really all they care about. Now, and get drunk, right? They're going to, they're definitely going to drink a 6-pack, most of them. So when an 18-year-old Honduran came into my convenience store in Hot Springs, Arkansas, I never carded them because I knew they were putting in a day's work. And who am I to tell a working man that he can't have his 12-pack of beer? And yeah, sometimes they drive around and they have car crashes and they end up in the system, right? So now the system, the individuals that comprise the masses, well, they've demanded their pound of flesh. So now these people are in the system and they have the money to give these lawyers. And so the lawyer knows, well, I got to go in here and have a go at Judge Boyd because I need this person who doesn't really understand what's happening on some level, although maybe they do. They at least want something for their money. It's people who were born in America that don't really mind forking over any amount of money and not demanding a value for it, right? Oh, look, our grocery budget, what we pay for groceries doubled. Oh, well, it doubled overnight. Oh, well, there's Biden's poopy diaper to blame for it. So everything's fine as long as we can point and mock and ridicule. You're mocking and ridiculing yourselves, folks. Hate to break it to you. You're mocking and ridiculing yourselves. And so now, part of the way they're having to go at Judge Boyd is they're arguing with her and they're trying to overtalk her. And they're trying to tell her, well, the other judges, and you know what she said? Well, the other judges are wrong. And see, now you have a black woman who a lot of people are just going to say, oh, that's a DEI hire. Well, here's what freedom is about. Freedom is about the fact that some black women are more intelligent than everybody in the room. And some black women know how to go through the system and become a lawyer and be a prosecutor and a defense attorney and be better than the other defense attorneys and prosecutors at their level, just like I'm better as a truck driver than almost all of the truck drivers at my level of experience. Not with backing up, but in most other areas. Because that is meritocracy. That's what Americans, especially the so-called conservatives, they uphold this idea of work hard, outcompete, outfox, outsmart your adversaries in a capitalist system which is adversarial, whereby the cream is supposed to rise to the top. And that's why we don't have capitalism, because the cream, what LARPs as capitalism won't let the cream rise to the top, because at the top, the corporations who already climbed to the top of the mountain have occupied the strategic high ground where competition is a sin. Once the corporation, you know, like from The Price is Right, once that the miner yodels his way to the top of the fucking mountain, well, now he has the high ground and he can kick in the face anybody who managed to crawl their happy ass up there, right? Some notion of Sisyphus perpetually pushing the boulder. And so now it's, if Benton is dumb enough to be gaslit into his own status as a man and his own validity and authority and substance as a human is to be a version of Sisyphus pushing the boulder every day to make rich people richer, to treat his own humanity as if he were a fool, and nobody respects that. Now they pretend to because of status quo, social contract, peer groups. So if other people were foolish enough to perform that, as I was foolish enough to perform that, for a time, consensus can never represent manifested truth and what is righteous. Meanwhile, based on Christianity itself, is righteousness common or uncommon in this place? So to treat righteousness as commonplace is to show what you think of its value. It's to internalize what this realm knows of righteousness, which is the lack of righteousness. So you show yourself for what you are. And that's not an accusation. That's a manifestation of truth, saying, oh, I'm not the judge, meaning I don't administer the condemnation. You function as your own judge and condemner, because what I'm now addressing is beyond redemption and can never be redeemed and can never move beyond this place, meaning it belongs to this place, meaning if this is a discrete place separate from the larger force of what I am, what's going on here that traces its origins here and cannot move beyond here, it stays here. Let the dead bury the dead. See, what is dead buries itself. There is no reason for, air quotes, God to return and destroy the wicked. The wicked are their own means of destruction. Again, yet another inversion. There's simply nothing to be done. So when folks like the Sanity Machine, King Stephen, says that he will seal the demons in here, well, in a way, he's correct. Now, however he conducts his affairs, and whether he is debunkable or not debunkable, it means nothing. Anybody is able to reference those energetic forms and laugh and mock and ridicule and rub people's noses in it, and some of us are a little more sadistic than others. Some of us, meaning the individuals that comprise the mass, are a little more sadistic. So the fact that certain individuals would never behave sadistically or masochistically or sadomasochistically, what's the relevance of that? Does that get projected onto others? Right? Meanwhile, again, reconcile with Krishnamurti. As long as I understand the sadomasochism and the masochism and the sadism that may lie within the being, again, not repressing it, this is the integration of the so-called shadow self. It's to figure out what's in there. Oh, look, little dash of sadism, perhaps. Oh man, that's ugly. Don't want to see that. Yeah, you don't want to repress it. Go ahead and repress whatever's in there instead of integrating it and alchemizing it and moving beyond it and transcending it in the context of a spiritual war. The warrior has lost. That's a warrior undoing himself before he can even unsheath his sword. And that's a lot of what Mushashi was all about. See, it's victory by avoiding undoing oneself. Again, inverted. Because what Mushashi was victory. What I am is victory. The only possibility of defeat is to undo my own self via my own performance within this place that seeks to incentivize me to undo myself, and if at all possible, to never even join the battle whatsoever. So, what Mushashi says is that if 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 the being is a warrior, then be that, embody that in all things, strategically. And a big part of the strategy is effectiveness in not being one's own doing. So most people that could be spiritual warriors in the context of an internal spiritual war, and the war is correctly identified as full acceptance of death, meaning full acceptance of this realm as exactly what it is. And that's always an internal battle because the individual can do nothing whatsoever about this deathless dystopia, which is why individuals love to loop into we level problem solving. It's this idea that everybody can come together and sing kumbaya and reform dystopia. Meanwhile, make the world a better place. Meanwhile, it very quickly turns into the ending of Mad Men, the TV show, where Don Draper sits cross-legged in somewhere in California, probably Ojai, where Krishnamurti ended up, and he sits cross-legged with a bunch of white folks and your token black, perhaps, and achieves enlightenment. And then what does he come up with? The strongest brand in the history of all humanity. Now, the Christians will immediately talk about Jesus. Well, that's a completely, you're not wrong, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But the real thing, Coca-Cola, I'd like to teach the world to sing. Let us make man in our image. And the most famous advertising campaign of all time. And it touched something in the human soul, right? And so that is subversion. That is subversion of what I am. And Moloch's machine does it almost effortlessly. And the individual has no fucking idea at the level of mind, body, and spirit bootstrapping within themselves. They don't understand that this is what's happening, even as individuals increasingly have the ability to seemingly intellectualize, but it's ideas that are prepackaged by the system and are sent to the individual through push notification, whether literal or figurative, and that is the definition of irony, because remember, this place certainly has a sense of humor, and that is the Truther 101. That's the choose your own conspiracy. Instead of choose your own adventure, it's choose your own conspiracy, and that's Normie as baby Truther. And because the system, in order to facilitate the mind control and operate the psychology, understands that it's necessarily hobbling the ability of the individual to access critical thinking. So the system says, hey, that's fine. The system has never-ending energies, and maybe this is why the loosh must happen. Maybe it's because the system in Moloch's machine must psychically, vampirically, like Neo in a tank in the Matrix with millions of other beings in tanks powering the system. Maybe this is why that's necessary on some level, so that the system never lacks the energy to think for the individual. And is that not algorithm? Is that not supercomputer? Is that not simulation? Is that not mathematics? Is that not John Nash's The schizophrenic, lest we forget. And schizophrenia is to be infested with demons. So all of these super intelligent demonic personalities would have entered into John Nash, so that John Nash could bring forth the mathematics of game theory optimal. So that Peter Thiel could one day lecture on Antichrist. Well, the entire system is Antichrist. Meanwhile, Christians are out here looking for a human being who will be representative of Antichrist. The system is representative of Antichrist, but it's doing it ironically, literally, and figuratively within delusion and illusion. It's doing it both ways. And what is Baphomet? Baphomet goes both ways. Baphomet has half male, half female genitalia androgynously. And what I just described goes both ways, literal and figurative. And the game is so in your face, or you're so in the game, you're so in the game's face, you can't see any of this. Let he who has eyes to see, see, and let he who has ears to hear. Well, if that ain't you, why not? That's you. It ain't me. It ain't me, babe. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It ain't me you're looking for, babe. Meaning you can't follow me to the promised land. I can't lead you into victory. Only you can do that by accessing the thing inside of you that will never know defeat. If it's there, if it ain't there, then this ain't for you anyway. But if it's there, victory is in accessing the thing within you that will never know defeat. That's how Musashi won all his duels, by accessing the part of him that would never know defeat. And just waiting until his enemy temporarily falsely identified with the possibility of defeat, thereby defeating themselves. See? Again, inverse. Through what? A spiritual war within the individual. The transcending and overcoming of one's own self-imposed limitations that are created on a perpetual, ongoing basis through the subversion of the yang form or the creative form. And tell me again that what Benton is in the context of the performance is not a performance representative of spiritual warrior genius. Yeah, go ahead and lie. Go ahead and lie. Because everything that's been described in the context of this discourse is representative of spiritual warrior genius. It's not possible to deliver this discourse without hashtag GOML. Oh, well, he's getting arrogant and tooting his own horn again. Well, it'd be nice not to have to. Who else is going to recognize the achievements? Now, occasionally, Benton has emailed an Amazon gift card code, thank you for the donation. They go to what? They go to enable the performance through the dark chocolate that maybe would not have been consumed, through the ginseng root extract that might not have been consumed, through the, again, the egg yolks that might not have been consumed, the cayenne powder, see, the Ceylon cinnamon, the yerba mate. This all costs money, folks. And every bit of it goes into my physical body. Later on today, apricots out of a can. Why? So that my motherfucking bowels can move. Oh, look, dried prunes. Why? So that my motherfucking bowels can move, so that my intestines and that my large intestine may continue to be healed, so that the physicality can cope with the toxins and the poisons. All right. So Benton can have a can of black beans and a can of herring later today. And God forbid, once every other week or maybe once a week, a fucking double deuce of Guinness and maybe a slice or 2 slices of pizza. Oh my God, the horror. Because remember, he refuses to externally bootstrap in order to pay for his own Guinness and his own pizza. Who is he? Who does he think he is? Well, I'm the only person out here that's able to bring forth spiritual warrior genius in the context of a discourse, and meanwhile wants to. Who the hell wants to be so nerdy, and who wants to speak as the smartest person that sounds the dumbest, and to do such a seemingly foolish thing that only 16 people value, and probably half of you are listening as haters? right? Which is fine. Who cares? If there's even 16 listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for liking the stream. Much appreciated. It's the least I could do. And if folks are moved to donate, donate. If they're not, don't. Some are moved to thwart and undermine and punish and mock and ridicule, which says nothing whatsoever about me, although it does. It's a tacit acknowledgement of what I am. But then individuals who are unable to get on my level, but who know they have the... See, here's the worst thing, is that there's people in the so-called truth community who have the ability, perhaps, who have the potential, perhaps, to get on my level, who simply won't. And that's the most frequent and strongest ridiculers and spiritual attackers. Well, hey, don't threaten Benton with a good time, because that's just going to remind old Benton of the spiritual war within. So thank you for helping a expert level spiritual swordsman sharpen his blade and become even more efficient in his swordsmanship. Thank you for that. Right? And if that's not alchemy, I don't know what is. And at some point, old Benton's going to vibrate up out of here. And it might be after Benton goes back to truck driving, if that's in the cards, in the near future, and takes a 1099 job and says to the company, hey, I'll work for you, but I'm not going to form a corporation. You have to pay me on my Social Security card, so that when the government shows up and says, hey man, where's our 30 grand of this 100 grand you made as a truck driver and never paid us our tax? And but the Christian says, well, render unto Caesar, and cites Paul, but thinks they're quoting Jesus, like happened to me the other day. And the guy said Romans, and I said, that's Paul. But the guy thought he was quoting Jesus. And I said, no, that's Paul. And he said, well, it was Paul quoting Jesus. Okay, well, whatever. I'll hear you out, sir, but we're already in folly and error. Sir, please continue. And you know what I'm going to tell the government? Well, no, I'm not paying you a dime. And they say, well, you sure you don't want to get on this payment plan? Yeah, I'm sure. Well, are you aware of the penalties for tax evasion? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, here's your court date. Because, most likely they would trust me to show up for court. They probably OR me, own recognizance. Oh, yeah, I'll happily show up to court, no problem. And, federal court. Yeah, here I am. The prosecutor's going to offer me a plea deal. Whatever. Here I am before the judge. How do you plead? Well, Your Honor, it seems like I really don't have an option but to plead not guilty in this moment. But, then the prosecutor is going to offer me a deal. Because this is the feds. Remember, this is like 96% conviction rate. And, probably just take whatever the prosecutor orders. Or maybe I'll just tell the judge guilty. How do you plead? Guilty. And watch him just, what? What do you mean, guilty? Because he knows I haven't met with the prosecutor yet. Huh? What? Or she, probably be a she. Yeah, I done it. And I'll do it again if you let me, I'll do it again. That's righteousness, see. Righteousness knows what it is doing is proper. See. They say, oh, what about the law? You mean the law of man? That's dead. The law of man is dead. It belongs to this place. What are you talking about? The law of man, it's dead. And there is no justification for this system of things. There is no so how can there be a justification for me driving a truck and contributing to society and saying, no, I won't pay my tax? And while understanding that, here you are, sir, off to a cell. And it's the fear of what? Gin pop. Well, you think I don't know how to end up in the hole? They say, well, you're not scared of the hole, because isn't that the strongest punishment within the jail, is to be separated from these scumbags? I say, well, the warrior has already won the spiritual war of full acceptance of death. So yeah, And maybe by meditating for 40 days and 40 nights and fasting, I don't know, is the end of that just to ascend up out of this realm like Christ ascended up out of this realm? Because it's not going to happen while I'm able to buy apricots and ginseng root and dark chocolate and yerba mate, and it's not going to happen out here. It's too easy to get my hands on all of these things. So in fact, the donations are helping keep me here in a way. So I suspect this system of things will never see fit to put me in federal prison, because that would not be in the benefit of the system, although it would benefit the system perhaps to have old Benton vibrate up out of here and make it a little more possible for antithesis to pause the game and have the courtroom scene from Devil's Advocate. But then, is that a deathless dystopia? See, does antithesis want this to end? Has antithesis lost its own way in subverting the creative force of something that has never known an end and that knows no end and no beginning, and therefore has no beginning? Right? Is it lost in its own sauce, as creation is seemingly lost within its own sauce within delusion? So if it actually, and in fact, is this not a game of chicken to find out, well, who cares the least? Is it love, tolerance, and acceptance, or is it the lack of all of those characteristics? Would it be love, tolerance, and acceptance that's more attached to keeping this thing going, or would it be lack of love, lack of tolerance, lack of acceptance, lack of justice? See? And is it the defeat and undoing of antithesis by thesis just saying, hey, what I am overwhelms. What I am overwhelms. And Benton's own performance, at times, diatribes delivered at the top of his lungs in the streets of Los Angeles. Well, that's verboten. That's not cool. That's not kosher. That's not copacetic. It overwhelms. See? So does thesis or assertion or creation and all of these powerful forces, don't they overwhelm? So hell, thesis is probably lost in the sauce at this point. So I suspect it's not going to cast me into prison, because that's what I might want. And in a war with tacticians and battlefields and strategists and commanders, whether again literal or figurative, irony, the moment the enemy, that which makes an enemy of what I am, recognizes in a chess game, right, that I'm Bobby Fischer in their ass, and I want them to fall for my gambit. And the gambit is, hey, pretty please with sugar on top, can I be incarcerated at some point? And where I will have nothing to do other than vibrate about this motherfucker. And that left to my own devices, my own preference and desire, it's a little too comfortable even living in a car, sleeping in a car without a pot to piss in, with a 3-liter water bottle to piss in, right? To empty out in the early AM. It's a little too comfortable. See? And I'm a little too attached to some of these things. See? So I probably will fuck off and drive the truck. And I probably will continue to not pay the federal income taxes. See? And I suspect there may be no punishment, because there can't be a punishment. Because the punishment's already been acceptance of death. Now, if I really, really internally bootstrap, I'll just do that in the streets of Los Angeles. I'll just go sit cross-legged somewhere. And whatever people give me as they pass by, I'll take it. And maybe I'll give it to somebody else. Because most of what would be given will not be consumable, because it will be bullshit, highly processed foods. And every once in a while, somebody might understand that he's only going to eat it if we go buy it off of the grocery store buffet, right? The bar, and they'll bring me, whatever. Fried taters, and maybe I'll do a little Carl from Sling Blade for them. Them some mighty good taters, and everybody will be happy. And giving is receiving. And they can feel good about themselves. And I'll enjoy the taters. And my digestion is now healed enough to even be able to eat taters fried in grapeseed oil, pan fried in grapeseed oil. But I still go in there and look at the spread, and I don't eat the taters because they're grapeseed oil. But yeah, if somebody gave them to me and I was already hungry, yeah, I can eat them, sure, and not get sick. Just like I can consume whatever was in the egg yolk, and that's actually good for my stomach and intestines because it is fermented on some level, right? But people are now talking about yogurt and probiotics and kefir and all of this stuff. Well, yes, some of that is animal products that have been aged, right? Oh, well, that'll make you sick and kill you. I don't know. Maybe you, not me. What you know, what's an egg going to do to me? I got to fear the egg. Don't fear the reaper. They got me out here fearing eggs. I don't think so. Meanwhile, don't fear the reaper, which the brain hears as fear of the reaper because the human mind cannot process negation. So the system says, you better fear that reaper. You better fear God. Well, God, if God is love, doesn't know what fear is. So if the being is fearing God, what is the being fearing? Is the being fearing Moloch? Uh-oh, who's putting their stink on it down there? I think learning to fly is probably not a stinker, though. You're not a stinker, are you? I don't think you are. Well, you're a daisy if you are. Oh, yeah, we're getting definitions and whatever's going on down there, it's fine. We'll let the chat do whatever it does with it. It's all good. It's all good in the hood. Hey, did we get a dono? I think we got a dono. Thank you, Jen. I do love the tokens. And that's not an insult. Because the token donation feels just as good as the large donation. Isn't that funny how that works? And then 10 tokens equals one, a singular, or 50, right? Or 25 or 50 tokens adds up to, one larger donation. But it feels the same feeling, but 50 times or 25 times. See? Isn't that interesting? And maybe the person knows that. And if 10 people gave a token every stream, well, that's almost an entire day's food. 10 tokens, 10 token donos is Benton gets to buy most of the food for the day. Again, it's the least I could do. Oh, this is going to be a good stretch. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Woo. What a blessing. Healed in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. How rude. Something going on down there. It's the beans. Meanwhile, my study of the digestive system says as long as it's not excessive, flatulence is healthy. And at a certain point, with my own chronic illness, it had been so long since I passed gas. When it finally started to happen, I realized that was progress. I said, wow, that's amazing. And I was so ill that it took a couple of months to heal up enough to be able to start having gallbladder attacks. Because that meant the bile was now flowing enough. I was having enough bile flow to actually be able to have a proper gallbladder attack. And if anybody's ever had one of those, that's no fun. Pain don't hurt. Oh, 2 hours a day of strong nausea, but simultaneously can't vomit? Okay, sure. That's a purge. That is a purge. See? And the purge is never not healthy. Now, people immediately go external and think the purge, like a movie. No, the internal purge. Purging the purge that begins internally. Well, how else is the way to be prepared that the risen Christ, the resurrected Christ, may rise within me? See, what is in the way must be purged first, which is part of the function of the shaman. And y'all don't want anything to do with the shaman because he's weird and he's strange. And if you let the shaman live in your shed out back, and you run an extension cord and a winder unit, and you give him a desk to set up his streamer equipment and an internet connection, well, what will the neighbors think? But remember, you're free and you get to do whatever you want on your own property, because you're not only are you free, you're more free than anybody's ever been in all of human history, slave. Because even if you desire to host the shaman for the benefit of yourself, as well as whoever you may know, right? And then the existential crisis of who will I be if I allow these internal processes, a purge, an entering in, a baptism in the Holy Spirit. I can't give you any of that. The shaman can help the being get everything out of the way, and then maybe if the individual is able to choose to do what would be necessary, then maybe the Holy Spirit will enter in. See, that's not Benton's business. See, within the context of delusion and illusion, I'm the individual. Benton is performing as individuation of the indivisible force and psychology of Moloch's machine. So that's above Benton's pay grade, again, within the context of all of those things. So now, will Benton do everything he's able to do? Sure, of course. But again, giving is receiving. So why wouldn't I freely give? But then why won't anybody freely give to me? But people will try to invite me into their home, sure, because then I can be hidden away between the walls. And then, yeah, the nosy neighbor looky-loos might want to know, well, what's going on in there. We see this guy coming and going. But to have him in the shed in the backyard, oh, wait a minute, now there's safety's at risk. Because he's going to need to leave that shed at 3 in the morning probably. Or at some point in the early AM, right? Because he's not going to be able to keep your hours. The shaman, the abbot, the Zen Buddhist, whatever he is, his practices must happen very, very, very early in the morning. And he must retire very early in the evening. So he's not available to hang out with you and socialize. Maybe once a month, right? But he's not able to get on your program. And this is what I mean by I can't lift you up, but you can drag me down. I can't get on your program. Your program drags down. Your program is degenerate. You're up all night. Now, can you hang out with Benton in the early AM because you're up all night? No, because up all night and early morning don't mix. See, up all night crew and early in the AM crew don't mix. That's why when I'm out here physically bebopping around early in the morning on my way to the morning constitutional and to pour out the piss jugs and to take a walk and get the blood flowing, I intentionally avoid everybody because I know almost everybody's up all night crew that I physically encounter, and those energies don't mix. See? And I know from experience of living out of a backpack and vagabonding 40 of the U.S. states over a period of years that the people who want me to come live in their home with them all have issues, and they want to get me on their program to validate their own activities because they're alone in their homes. See? And I'm not trying to get anybody on my program. because my program, you can't be on the program Benton's on. It takes 15 fucking years. Or maybe you're a little, even if you're better than me in that way, it's going to be years. You can't just day one start living the way Benton's living. Right? Go sit cross-legged on the floor with a straight back in meditation and tell me how long you can do it. See? It's a process. And it's not to brag, it's to say that we ain't the same thing. Now, maybe we are at the level of Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 Spark of Divinity, but individuals prove that they don't want to bootstrap inside of themselves. And to bring it back to the discourse, that's the only way to make the world a less horrific place. See? This is where individuals prove that they're simply unwilling to protect the children. And I accept that individuals will not protect the children. And the only way to protect the children is for me to have grown and changed and evolved within myself through a process of internal bootstrapping, and to continue to do that. To be able to look at what's happening to the children without turning away. Because the creative force at a median aggregate level, when averaged out, on some level, I am. Shouldn't say that, that's a violation. Benton, in the context of the performance, scratch the previous statement from the record, please. Every brushstroke in the now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone, either serves curse or blessing. And in fact, it's to treat one's blessing as if it were a curse. So people don't understand consciously that they're painting a picture through the subversion of their creative force of all imaginable horrors being visited upon the youth and the babes and the toddlers and the newborns from day one, sacrificed to Moloch and Moloch's machine. They don't know that that's the picture they're painting, but they are, and their subconscious knows. And that's what this realm mocks and ridicules and says, well, look at you. How can you be high and mighty and worthy of respect? Because this realm sees the picture and knows the symbolism, and it laughs and cackles and says, look at them. And it says, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And it laughs and laughs and laughs. And now we read, pardon me, from the already debunked Allen Ginsberg's Section 2 of Howl, because I'm not sure everybody knows what the heck I'm talking about by Moloch's machine. So let's define it. Thank you, Mr. Ginsberg, for defining it. Because I would not be able to describe it in this way. And I'm not into poems, folks. This is a poem. I'm not into poems. And if I was, I wouldn't be ashamed to tell you. But I'm just not into poems. Never written poetry other than, haiku, I guess? All right, here we go. And I might choose, there's a couple of parts that are sexual that I might skip past. Or may not. We'll see. I mean, most of us realize that Ginsberg was a homosexual. And then, of course, PDF. It's on his own Wikipedia page. But I don't know, does that mean I can't read the poem to you? And not in my world, but whatever. All right, Howl by Allen Ginsberg, Section 2. What sphinx of cement and aluminum bashed open their skulls and ate their brains and imagination? Moloch, solitude, filth, ugliness, ash cans, and unobtainable dollars. Remember, let me add my editorial comment. This is what the children are sacrificed to. Children screaming under the stairways. Boys sobbing in armies, old men weeping in the parks. Moloch, Moloch, nightmare of Moloch, Moloch the loveless, mental Moloch, Moloch the heavy judger of men. Moloch the incomprehensible prison. Moloch the crossbone soulless jailhouse and congress of sorrows. Moloch whose buildings are judgment. Moloch the vast stone of war. Moloch the stunned governments. Moloch, whose mind is pure machinery. Moloch, whose blood is running money. Moloch, whose fingers are 10 armies. Moloch, whose breast is a cannibal dynamo. Moloch, whose ear is a smoking tomb. Moloch, whose eyes are 1,000 blind windows. Moloch, whose skyscrapers stand in the long streets like endless Jehovahs. Moloch, whose factories dream and croak in the fog. Moloch, whose smokestacks and antennae crowd the cities. Moloch, whose love is endless oil and stone. Moloch, whose soul is electricity and banks. Moloch, whose poverty is the specter of genius. Moloch, whose fate is a cloud of sexless hydrogen. Moloch, whose name is the mind. Moloch, in whom I sit lonely. Moloch, in whom I dream angels. Crazy in Moloch, sexual reference in Moloch, lack love and manless in Moloch. Moloch, who entered my soul early, that's the sacrifice. Editorial comment added. Moloch, in whom I am a consciousness without a body, an acknowledgement of that which I am. That's the, again, editorial comment. And you see the I am. I hesitate to even say that. That was Ginsburg saying that, not me. Moloch, who frightened me out of my natural ecstasy, meaning Moloch thwarting what otherwise the performance would be, a performance of natural ecstasy. Moloch, whom I abandoned or abandon. Wake up in Moloch, light streaming out of the sky. Moloch, Moloch, robot apartments, invisible suburbs, skeleton treasures, blind capitals, demonic industries, spectral nations, invisible madhouses, granite, again, sexual reference omitted, monstrous bombs. They broke their backs lifting Moloch to heaven. That's out of the Bible, right? What do they call that? When they tried to build some Tower of Babel, right? Pavement, trees, radios, tons, lifting the city to heaven which exists and is everywhere about us. Visions, omens, hallucinations, miracles, ecstasies, gone down the American River, dreams, adorations, illuminations, religions, the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit. Breakthroughs over the river, flips and crucifixions. Despairs, 10 years animal screams and suicides, minds, new loves, mad generation down on the rocks of time. Real holy laughter in the river. They saw it all, the wild eyes, the holy yells. They bade for farewell. They jumped off the roof to solitude, waving, carrying flowers down to the river, into the street. And at least a third of the audience fled the artistic performance. Because a third of you lack the ability to process art. And surprise, surprise, what number within delusion, within the context of Lucifer rebelling against so-called God the Father, right? Air quotes God, so-called God the Father in the story of the Bible, a third of the angels rebelling and fighting against creation, love, and artistic ability. A third of you, surprise, surprise, were unable to even witness a performance of art. A third of you, if you went into an art museum, wouldn't know what to do with it. A third of you will never create art because you're so cut off from God, air quotes. You're so cut off from the kingdom of love within you that you can't possibly create art. And meanwhile, what do some of these intellectuals in my YouTube feed talk about? Well, they mock and ridicule and say, well, these bozo right-wingers and fascists and make America great again people, traditional family values, after sacrificing their children to Moloch. Well, They live in a society that is now incapable of producing art. What do you think all this graffiti is? Right? And so the third of humanity, because remember, it's not half, it's not left or right, it's 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 independent. So you got a third of the population that can't process art. They can't live in a town with graffiti murals and artistic displays, whether it's fashion or music or whatever I do, preaching and hooping and hollering in the streets as a life as art, right? A third of you can't process it. And you're even overrepresented in the so-called truth community, right? Imagine living as a human cut off from art, cut off from love, cut off from tolerance, cut off from acceptance. That's what the bozos who got a big old feeling downstairs when they see a particular type of administration in the White House. That's how they feel. Trump in his fascist era makes them feel some type of way in their pants. Because if they were able to circulate their sexual energies throughout their chakra system, as I've been able to do for probably 10 years now, right? And to alchemize those energies, well, that must be artistically expressed. Or what happens? Frustration, resentment, pent up aggression, right? So in some way, Benton has to take to the streets and perform at times. Because those energies must be unleashed somewhere. And they're not going to leave the form through an erection into somebody else's energy sphere, right? That's not appropriate any longer. That's not finna happen, right? So what now? And a third of you can't even be in the presence of art, right? And that's my basis of compassion towards you. And some people have a creative side and want to repress it. Again, repression is always harmful to the individual. See how it works? And the system knows all of this. The system knows how to manipulate a third of the population and to manipulate another third, and to do all of the manipulations based on the characteristics of the groups and to play one against the other. And that's right there in Orwell, you know, the three different factions, Oceania and whatever it is, you know. I don't remember what they called it. I got to Google it. What are the three governments in Orwell's 1984 called? Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. See? And that's where you get into this. Oceania is at war with Eurasia. Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia, but then later on it's Oceania is at war with East Asia, and Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. And for the purposes of Orwell's 1984, you know, the story was told from the context of living in one of those three nations. And people will read Orwell's 1984 and still won't understand the game. They still won't understand that's a representation of society broken into three groups. And one of the two always pitted against the other. And that's your left, that's your Democrat, Republican, and Independent. There it is, right there. Oh, but this can't possibly be an Orwellian dystopia because the system in operating the psychology of the individual through mind control pushes off into the future and says, well, yeah, the economy is going to collapse. Things are starting to get bad. What are you talking about? This is a deathless dystopia, and it's sustained at the level of collapse while people say this is not sustainable. Oh, this has always been and always will be. within the context of delusion because it's maintained at the level of collapse. The Incredible Hulk is always angry. That's his secret. See, it is that on some level. And it's not my problem that bozos can't critically think their way out of a fucking paper bag. That's not my problem. Now, do I suffer for it? Yeah, if I'm dumb enough to suffer for it. Because that's my own spiritual war, is to defeat whatever within me rejects the notion of a full acceptance of death. This is death. This thing called life is death. To come to this place, this world of death and game of lies, is to enter into a realm of death, but to treat it as if it had life whatsoever. Well, with the true knowledge of self, recently unlocking the achievement within the world of death and the game of lies, I know what I am. And now I know the nature of this place because I know what I am. And I understand that this place is set up in opposition to what I am. Therefore, if what I am is the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation and life itself and supreme authority, this place is the lack of all of that. And so to be individuated here, which is only possible within the context of delusion via illusion, is to then enter into a thing that's called and told, and I'm told that it's life, it's death. But who's going to tell the children, hey children, we've sacrificed you to Moloch within a world of death and a game of lies, so have a good time. We've packed you a lunch and sent you off to the government indoctrination center that you may be mind controlled into being a good little corporate addressable unit so that rich people can be made richer every new moment into perpetuity, because that is the function of the economy, and it always achieves its purpose perfectly because they don't know who they are unless their wealth increases in every new moment. They go into existential crisis, so that's why all of this must happen, and it serves the purposes of the opposite or the lack of what I am, also known as antithesis. And yes, it's all really happening, and anybody can figure it out for themselves if they go to war with themselves, within themselves, and fully accept death, meaning to accept this realm exactly as it presents itself. And are you telling me the trees are dead? Yes. You're telling me that the terra firma is dead? Yes. You're telling me that the air is dead? Yes. You're telling me that my beloved canine pet is dead? Yes. Your very flesh is dead. So are the animals. Why is it so difficult to digest the food? Because it's dead, and your body's dead. And in order for death to drive out death, why would that ever be an easy process? So me intentionally avoiding the bullshit highly processed foods, it's still hard to make a turd. But the more I accept fully death, the easier the bowels move. Because Chinese medicine associates the large intestine and the lungs with what? Grief, which is what? The process of accepting death. Grief is the process of accepting death. So the being's digestion functions or dysfunctions at their own level of being able to accept death. So I'm actually selfishly choosing to level up my own ability to accept death fully by going to war within myself to be able to fully accept death enough to be able to make a turd. And again, this realm has a sense of humor. Ha ha ha, hilarious. Yes, it's all really happening, folks. It's all really happening. Reminder to have a little sip of water. Well, we're done. You're welcome. If anybody feels like donating, it's the least I could do. Thanks for watching. Bye.